Well, welcome back. So this lecture, our video lecture, is going to be relatively short because I've given you a fair amount of readings that accompany this lecture that'll talk more about the subtleties of corruption. Now, there are many definitions of corruption, and we're going to talk about those during the lecture. But a kind of a generic vanilla definition is whenever you give up a degree of integrity, whenever you cross the line of legal or legitimate behavior in exchange for position, for privilege, for money, or some other kind of benefit, even trade. Okay? So you do something that you probably shouldn't be doing in exchange for some sort of reward. It's a generic definition of corruption. And there is a spectrum of corruption. So we'll start, there's actually 4 of them that we'll talk about now. So we got facilitating payments. Okay, facilitating payments. Subtle bribery and open bribery. Okay. And major and or extortion. Major and extortionate bribes. Major and extortionate bribes. Okay. So what are these? Well, first of all, you look at the size of the payments. It kind of goes from small, a little bigger, medium, and then major. Okay. Let me give some examples to kind of help you understand. So I had a friend who worked in a developing country, and his company received ships. Okay, ships full of ships full of manufactured goods for distribution to the local market. Now, every time his ship came in full of goods, it was always the last to be offloaded, and it always caused problems for his company, and he didn't know why. So he went to the dock and he tried to figure out, what was going on, and he couldn't really get a straight answer. And then he found the forklift operator, the man who actually got the forklift on there and loaded stuff off ships to put it into the harbor. And basically what had to happen is this guy had to bring a carton of cigarettes every time a ship came in so that the forklift operator would take his stuff off the boats in a timely manner. Okay? So facilitating payments is kind of like if you want your service or your project done, you need to give some sort of payment or trade, and it'll actually be done kind of at a faster rate. Okay. Now, some of you may be asking, well, don't we have that in some way here in the States too? Well, think about going to the post office. Well, you can, just put a stamp on a letter and get it there, or you can pay a little bit extra for it to be express mail. That's a very good point. I was at a corruption conference just a few weeks ago, and we discussed that. And what we came to a conclusion was that, with the post office, that is a legal surcharge for premium service, whereas facilitating payments are typically not openly known, and it's not necessarily something that is legal or codified into the law. Okay, so my colleague that was having to pay, with cartons of cigarettes to get items, out of the dock, didn't really know that it was exactly 1 carton of cigarettes or $5 or exactly what the cost structure was. It was kind of a one-on-one, kind of a bribery situation, or facilitating, I should say. It was a facilitating payment. Also, facilitating payments typically to go to enrich an individual worker or bureaucrat, whereas when you pay, extra for express mail service at the post office, that goes into the post office's treasury. It doesn't, it's not paid to the clerk that you gave the extra money to at the post office. So those are kind of the differences. Now, when you shift from facilitating payments to forms of bribery, okay, so facilitating payments means, yeah, this is part of my job, but you're just paying me to do a little bit better, a little bit faster. Bribery means you're actually getting people to fundamentally change their courses of action. Okay, so I'm writing a paper right now. Hopefully, it'll be published one of these days, and I'm describing what it was like working with officials in a war-torn country. And one of the things that I noticed is certain things would just never get done unless you offered a bribe. So, would you do this for me? The answer was always no, I won't do that. It's part of my job, but I'm just flat out not going to do it, period. Or, that's not part of my job, and I'm not going to do it, but if you paid me something, I might be able to do that for you. However, it had a kind of an under-the-table character. It wasn't something that was even said directly, like if you give me this, but they would make references, oh, I'm so poor, I just can't afford to feed my family. If only I had a little extra money, then maybe I could work a little bit harder and help you out. Or, oh, I'm so hungry, if only I had a little bit of extra food available, or if only I had a coffee maker or an extra computer, or these kinds. They never said it exactly like, give me the money in exchange for something. They always had kind of this implied and tacit feeling to it. Okay. Now then we shift to open bribery. That's where something is very open and well known. I also experienced this. I lived in a country in the former Soviet Union, and I had a visa that was for 90 days. Okay? And I remember my 90 days was coming to an end. I asked my employer, well, do you want me to stay longer? What do you want me to do? Don't I need to get a visa extension? How does all that work? And their answer was, well, you don't really need a visa. When you're about to leave the country, you just pay the customs agent a little extra money and they'll let you go. I said, well, that seems strange to me. I don't feel like that's legal. Oh, no, it's fine. You just stay here, and when the job is done, you just pay the border agent. Everything will be fine. Well, I had trouble believing that. So I had a friend who worked at the U.S. Embassy in that country, and she'd had a law degree from that country and then also one from the U.S., so I figured she'd probably know what was going on. And I asked her, I said, well, can I just give some money to the agent on the way out? And she laughed, and she said, no, that's ridiculous. You'll go to jail for that. And I said, aha, I knew it. And she said, what you need to do is, if you want to do that, I'm a lawyer, and I'll contact a lawyer for the customs service, and then when you decide to leave, a supervisor from the customs service will come, and you pay the bribe to the supervisor. And this is exactly how much you have to pay per day extra that you stay over your visa, and you pay the supervisor. You don't just pay the border agent. You'll go to jail if you do that. Right? So this was open bribery. This was something that maybe wasn't necessarily written in law, but was codified in practice. It was open, it was understood, and that's the way business was conducted there. Okay? And then, of course, you have major and extortionate bribes. Again, I had a friend who experienced this firsthand. And extortion means not that you're trying to get someone else to change their behavior for you. It's that certain actors will actually threaten you if you don't give them some sort of reward. Again, I had a colleague. He worked for a large international hotel chain that had just opened its borders up to the west, and his company was the first to build one of these international hotels in this country. He was very excited, but the construction workers kept getting harassed and beaten up. The executives kept getting threatened. The construction projects kept getting burned down, and he didn't know why. Okay, and then one day this man showed up at his office. He didn't know who the man was, but the man had taken pictures of this guy's family and made comments around the lines of, "It's wonderful that you have such a lovely family. Maybe you should do more to protect them, like paying us protection money so that we don't have to come over here and take care of these problems for you." At this point, this executive said, you know what, it's just not worth it. He sold his operations to a local company in that country, and then he completely pulled out of operations. So this is where the actor actually comes to you and solicits you to change your behavior. Okay, so we also have some mechanisms in the fight against corruption. So the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, also known as FCPA, means that it's a criminal and a civil offense to try to bribe any official of a foreign government ministry or member of a foreign political party or candidate in office. And that's a law that has global reach. Now, it sounds great, okay? Here's the problem. Accountants will typically measure a bribe as something that is a cash exchange. Okay, that's how economists think about it. Well, in my own experience and my own research indicates that a lot of bribery actually has nothing to do with cash payments. It may be the use of an apartment, or maybe lavish meals taken out. Sometimes it's even sexual favors. So there's a variety of things that are corrupt practices, kind of a corrupt exchange, that have absolutely nothing to do with money. Okay, so it's very, very hard to track these kinds of things. So what can you do as a manager to fight against corruption? Whew, man, that's a big question. You could write a whole dissertation on this, but we'll try to cover it quickly. So you can set up an ethics and compliance program. We've talked about that already, so that employees can think about corruption holistically with an ethics approach and understand what is and is not corruption and what might be corruption, and then through a compliance program establishing exactly what to do when confronted with corruption. Okay? Establish policies that have no tolerance for corruption at all. Make sure that you have an anti-corruption program, and make sure that you as a firm establish that you have a reputation for honesty. If you establish yourself as a firm that has a reputation for honesty, actors who engage in corruption, or foreign companies or countries that may be corruption prone, will be less likely to solicit you because they already know what the answer will be. Train your employees extensively. Give them scenario building, role playing. These are all great ways to fight corruption. If there is any sort of solicitation of corruption, whether that's subtle, open bribery, even facilitating payments, have some sort of a hotline set up so that you can have kind of a confidential complaint mechanism against corruption. Make sure that you enforce penalties against violators. You can't let it slide even once, otherwise you start to have a culture of corruption. Also make sure that you use diligence when you deal with consultants and intermediaries. Consulting and intermediary firms are also a way to hide corruption and corrupt payments. So make sure that your consultants are not doing anything that they shouldn't be doing either, and make sure that you're hiring legitimate consulting firms that actually perform consulting services, not companies that are just ghost companies for basically hiding corruption payments. And again, work with international organizations, industry groups, and share information and stories about corruption. So, corruption is one of the unfortunate, more widespread consequences of globalization. Again, corruption is able to occur because of bounded rationality. You don't always know what your affiliates in foreign countries are doing. It can still happen domestically, but it's a little bit easier to catch, I think. We're going to talk a whole lot more about this during our lecture, some of the pros and cons of corruption and some of these things. And so, for now, I will close it out. My name is Duncan Pelly. I hope you found this lecture entertaining and informative, and we'll see you next time.